What's up, guys? I'm here with a very dusty race car and 2 boxes of TorqStorm Superchargers awesomeness. So today we are going to get to work on getting this beautiful beast installed. Ta-da! If you have not seen my previous video unboxing all of this awesome TorqStorm stuff, go ahead and check that out. And I am so ready to get this thing torn apart and start throwing parts back at it for once, because it's been a lot of deconstruction for the past couple of weeks. So I want to start by saying that what you're about to see in my install may not be exactly what you go through with yours. Every TorqStorm kit will vary just a little bit depending on your application. So if you're putting it, on a Chevy motor or Mopar, Ford, everything is going to be just a little bit different. But TorqStorm does include color install manuals with steps all along the way. And if you need any help or have any questions further than what the manual explains, you can just shoot them an email and they'll be happy to fill you in. So what I ended up getting was the tuner kit, and what that basically means is you're going to get the supercharger, brackets, pulleys, tensioners, the blow-off valve, air filter, and all the hardware to mount everything. But what you're going to need to do is a little bit of fabrication to finish the project out. So you will have to fabricate all of your charge piping. You will need an intercooler, and then you're going to have to actually weld the flange on for the blow-off valve to get everything working properly. But that's pretty much it. So the first unofficial step in the whole process is removing any of the old stuff that you're not going to use or things that are going to be in the way for the install. So first on my list was going to be the alternator and any of the old bracketry for the engine that I won't be using anymore. With those things out of our way, we're going to crack into the instructions and hop into step 1. So as always, you're going to want to disconnect your battery before doing any kind of major work like this. But the first step is go ahead and grab our billet head plate for the passenger side, and we're going to install that with M10 bolts and washers. I like to snug these up by hand with a ratchet and then grab my torque wrench and torque them down to 29 foot-pounds per the instructions. Step 2 has us installing our straight-on water neck and thermostat. So go ahead and put whatever degree thermostat you like in there. I didn't have mine at the time I was fitting all this stuff up, so that's why it's missing. Go ahead and grab your factory bolts and torque those down to 11 foot-pounds. Third step is to go ahead and remove the supercharger belt tensioner. There's a single nut on the back side of the bracket we have to remove. We just pull this off because there is one bolt hiding behind the tensioner that we have to access in order to bolt the bracket to the engine itself. If you happen to have your accessory tensioner bolted up to the bracket as well, you're going to want to go ahead and remove that at this time. Now it's time to install our supercharger bracket and tensioners. So go ahead and grab the supplied hardware and the supplied aluminum spacers and bolt the supercharger bracket to the cylinder head bracket we installed in step 1. After you've installed the supercharger mounting bracket and the accessory belt tensioner, pick up your torque wrench and tighten everything down to 29 foot-pounds. After that, you can install your supercharger belt tensioner using the nut on the back side of the bracket that we took off earlier. Now it's time to mount the supercharger head unit to the mounting bracket using the 7 socket head bolts and washers. Like the manual states, it's a good idea to clock the compressor housing into the ballpark of where you want it to end up, because you could run into fitment issues if you don't. All you have to do to clock the compressor housing is loosen up the T-bolt clamp on top, rotate it into position, and tighten it back up to 73 inch-pounds. That's not very tight, so be careful not to overdo it. Once everything's in position where you like it, tighten everything down to 27 foot-pounds. In step 6, we're going to be pinning the crankshaft, and what this means is we're going to be joining the crankshaft pulley and the snout of the crankshaft via 2 steel pins. These pins are going to prevent the crankshaft pulley from slipping on the snout of the crank, as the blower will be putting a lot of load on it. TorqStorm highly recommends running ATI super dampers with their superchargers, so I went ahead and got one included with my kit. The first step to installing the new damper is to get the old original one out of the way. Since the ATI damper has a keyway milled into it, but the LS cranks don't use keys, we have to go ahead and fill the keyway up with black RTV to keep oil from seeping out of it. I ran up to AutoZone and rented a harmonic balancer installation tool to make sure I can install this ATI damper without damaging anything. After the hub was pressed on, I installed the ARP crankshaft bolt with a little bit of orange Loctite and torqued it down to 230 foot-pounds. Now this part of the process was terrifying at first, to be honest. I'd never done it before, but I'm going to use a series of photos here to hopefully give you guys a better idea of what exactly is going on. Here you can see one of two steel pins that's going to pin the crankshaft to the ATI damper hub. These ones came up measuring 746 thousandths long. This is TorqStorm's crankshaft pinning fixture, which is going to let us drill 2 holes in the end of the crankshaft directly opposite of each other. We want to drill holes in the end of the crankshaft that are deep enough to allow the pins to go all the way in, so we're going to go a little bit past at 850 thousandths to give us just a little bit extra room. On the left side of the drill bit, you can see that blue masking tape that's going to let us know when to stop drilling. Here you can see that a depth of 850 thousandths will give us plenty of room to accept the pins. After the depth is set in the drill bit, we bolt the fixture up to the end of the crankshaft and drill 2 holes, making sure we do not interfere with the keyway we just filled with RTV. Two things you want to make sure of when you're drilling these 2 holes is that you keep the drill bit lubricated and that you go slow. You don't want to risk breaking the drill bit off inside the holes. Once I drilled all the way down to my masking tape depth marker, I pulled the bit out and blew some compressed air inside the holes to get any leftover shavings or oil out of there. With a little bit of fear and a lot of patience, we wound up with 2 half moons out of the crankshaft itself and the ATI damper hub. Then I took a drift punch and tapped both pins in until they sat just below the surface that the crankshaft bolt will rest on. And now you see the finished product. We got the empty keyway filled with RTV so no oil can pass through, and the crank is pinned to the ATI damper hub. We get to relax a little bit in step 7, because all we're doing is mounting the supercharger crankshaft pulley with these 3 bolts. I went ahead and put some orange Loctite on these just in case, and they're only torqued down to 19 foot-pounds. Next step is getting the belts put back on the engine. I already had the accessory belt mounted, but I'd suggest grabbing a friend for the blower belt because these things are really tight when they're brand new. All you have to do is turn the tensioner counterclockwise with the 13mm wrench, and there's a nice picture in the manual that shows exactly how the belt should be routed. Step 9 is where we're going to place the blow-off valve and its flange somewhere in between the supercharger and the throttle body. So how and where you do this is completely up to you, and this is where your build can really become unique. I started out by mounting my oil cooler, power steering cooler, and my intercooler just to get a good idea of how the charge piping would have to run so that everything fits good. Once everything was in place, my friend Chris here at Open Road Metalworks went absolutely wild with some 3-inch aluminum tubing. Because the radiuses we had to complete were so tight, Chris decided to go ahead and pie cut the aluminum tubing. This is a really time-consuming process, but as you can see, it came out incredible. On the cold side of the charge piping, you can see where Chris welded on the blow-off valve flange, as well as a threaded bung for the intake air temp sensor. I was running a push-in sensor previously, but since we're under boost now, you're going to want a threaded one. Technically, step 10 is where we should be building all of our charge piping, but step 9 and 10 kind of run together. Step 11 is where we'll be mounting our included K&N air filter to the compressor inlet. Unfortunately, with my setup, the cooling lines run right into the path of the air filter, so I'll have to come up with a more remote solution. The 11th and final page in the TorqStorm install manual has a couple helpful tips and reminders to help everything go smooth. It's a nice little checklist that talks about spark plug heat ranges, tuning options, and all the little things that you should check before and after you fire it up for the first time.
So here we have it, guys. The TorqStorm Billet Supercharger kit, 100% installed. The bracketry is all there, the belt is on, the intercooler is there, the blow-off valve is there, and everything is done and ready to roll. Obviously, except for the fact that the blow-off valve and the intake port on the charger itself are still plugged up or covered because we're still making a huge mess in here. But really tidy, really fancy looking. I love it. Everything is of the utmost quality, and I'm so excited to see what kind of noise it makes. So obviously I'm super stoked on this, and I really hope that this video has been somewhat seamless and makes some sense to you. Obviously, if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out to either myself or the guys at TorqStorm, Chris and the rest of the team over there. It would be really helpful to any of you interested. Hopefully you've enjoyed this and you got a helpful tip or two. So hit up TorqStorm if you want your car to look as sick as this one does.